Let's talk about how one single machine didn't just print books, but completely remade society, kick-started economies, and even rewired the way our brains work. Seriously, this isn't just a story about some old technology. It's the origin story of the modern mind.
Just try to imagine a world where ideas had a physical speed limit. For almost all of human history, a new discovery, a big idea, or even a story could only travel as fast as a person could walk or a horse could ride. That was it. That was the absolute ceiling on human progress.
And getting that idea to spread, well, that was even slower. Every single copy of a book or a letter had to be painstakingly written out by hand. This meant knowledge was incredibly rare, it was unbelievably expensive, and it was so prone to human error. You know, a scribe skips a line here, misspells a word there, and boom, the original meaning could be warped or lost forever.
But then, in a little workshop in Mainz, Germany, around the year 1450, an invention came along that was like a multiplier for human thought itself. Suddenly, ideas could be duplicated perfectly and on a scale that was just unimaginable before. Everything was about to change.
You know, to really get the sheer impact of the printing press, we first have to understand the world it was born into. This was a world where knowledge was fragile, it was hyper-local, and it was tightly controlled by just a handful of powerful institutions, like the church and the universities.
I mean, just think about the bottlenecks of that manuscript culture. Copying a single book could take months, sometimes years, and errors would creep into those copies, and then those errors would get copied into the next versions. Literacy, that was basically a superpower for the elite few. And maybe the biggest problem of all, knowledge was perishable. A single fire in a library could wipe out unique text forever, setting back progress for generations. Ideas were essentially locked in place.
And that's where a guy named Johannes Gutenberg comes into the picture. Now, his real genius wasn't inventing one single thing from scratch. It was his ability to combine several different technologies, some old, some new, into one incredibly effective system, right there in the city of Mainz.
So what made this so revolutionary? It was a three-part system. First, he perfected movable type, little metal letters that were durable enough to be used again and again. Second, he took the screw press, a machine you'd see making wine, and adapted it to apply perfectly even pressure. And third, he came up with a new oil-based ink designed to stick to metal, not wood. It was the specific combination of these three things that finally made mass production a reality.
And the way this idea spread is fascinating. The know-how to build and run these presses was like a trade secret guarded by German printers. So as they left Mainz to open their own shops, they fanned out across Europe. You can literally trace the technology spreading in these waves, these concentric circles, moving out from its birthplace. Now keep this geographic pattern in mind because it's going to be super important in a bit.
Okay, so as these presses start popping up everywhere, their first big impact wasn't on religion or philosophy, it was on business. The press created a whole new commercial world, which demanded new skills and pretty much laid the foundation for modern commerce as we know it. You know, this quote from a Portuguese printer back in 1519 just nails it. These early printers weren't just scholars, they were entrepreneurs. They saw this huge, untapped market in the growing merchant class, a group of people who desperately needed practical skills to handle the new complexities of global trade. And the press delivered a whole new toolbox for them. For the first time ever, you could buy an affordable textbook on commercial arithmetic to figure out profit shares. You could get a manual explaining cutting-edge tech like double-entry bookkeeping, which is basically the operating system of modern capitalism. There were guides to commercial law, even tables that worked like a pocket calculator for interest rates. The press was upskilling an entire generation of business people.
But here's the crucial detail. All these benefits were intensely local. Books back then were heavy, they were fragile, and they were really expensive to ship. And that meant that the knowledge, the skills, and the economic buzz they created got concentrated right there, in the cities that actually had a printing press.
And what that did? Well, it created this powerful engine for urban growth. In fact, modern economic research has uncovered just how massive and measurable this effect really was.
So this leads to a number that's, honestly, it's pretty staggering. Between the years 1500 and 1600, European cities that had adopted a printing press grew, on average, 60% faster than similar cities that hadn't. Just let that sink in. That's not a small bump. That is a huge, transformative growth advantage, and it's all tied directly to this one technology.
Okay, but wait, this is the big question, right? The classic correlation versus causation problem.
Maybe printers were just savvy entrepreneurs who picked cities that were already booming. How can we possibly know for sure if the press was the cause of the growth?
Well, remember that geographic pattern we talked about earlier, the one with the concentric circles? That turns out to be the key. Because the technology spread person to person out from mines, a city's distance from mines was a huge factor in whether it got a press early on. The further away a city was, the lower its chance of getting a press, pretty much regardless of its economic potential. And this creates a perfect natural experiment for historians.
And here's what the data shows. In the century before Gutenberg's invention, there was absolutely no connection between how close a city was to mines and how fast it grew. None. But then look at the century after the press was invented. All of a sudden, a strong, statistically significant pattern appears. The further a city was from mines, the slower it grew. This is the smoking gun. It proves the press was the causal factor.
But all this explosive economic growth was really just a symptom of a much deeper change. The printing press wasn't just building bigger cities. It was fundamentally rewiring the human mind itself.
I mean, think about the implications here. Printing started to standardize language, locking in spelling and grammar, so people from different regions could communicate more easily. It encouraged a whole new way of thinking, these long, linear, sequential arguments backed up by citations and evidence, the very foundation of modern rational thought. It created a stable shared archive of knowledge, a global library that couldn't just vanish in a fire, allowing scholars to build directly on the work of others. And this, of course, puts science into overdrive, allowing for rapid sharing, verification, and, most importantly, the correction of errors across the entire continent.
Of course, this new superpower, the ability to scale information, had a dark side. The same machine that let revolutionary ideas cross borders also let disinformation spread faster than ever. The press that challenged the power of kings and popes was also used to print propaganda that fueled horrific religious wars. It was an incredible tool for both liberation and control.
But in the end, I think this quote just captures the true scale of the change perfectly. Writing gave an individual a kind of external memory, but the printing press? It gave our entire civilization a shared, permanent, communal hard drive. It created the very structures of modern thought that we now take for granted, and it's a powerful reminder of how a single technology can completely reshape our world and our minds.